James, noticed from looking at your body of work that several of the films feature life and death pretty heavily. That's a prominent theme in a lot of your movies. Why is that? When a lot of people might be too squeamish, they want to talk about other things, sci-fi, something happier, whatever.
Well, I think that you can feature life and death in any genre. I think that in many ways, even if you look at screenwriting tropes, that film is about life and death. But for me, I believe artistically it's important to tell the things that you know best. And for me, life and death and the themes of life and death are something that, for better or worse, have been very prominent in my life. My father died when I was 13 of an unknown illness. The CDC was involved and thought it was perhaps the first American case of SARS, and so no one knew what to do with it. He went from perfect health to dying in a week, and they were concerned that myself, my mother, my sister, anyone he had come in contact with might carry it and might cause something infectious, because they had tried literally all of the different antibiotics and all the different treatments, and nothing worked, nothing responded. He just got constantly worse and worse and worse, and he died the exact minute that he was admitted the previous week. So when you have something like that happen, and I had a very happy childhood, for the record. It was a wonderful time, a place where I was able to be imaginative and creative and foster that. My parents were both teachers, and growing up in a town of 123 people in rural South Georgia, I was able to live in a place that community was very important, which I think is also very important to film, and imagination was nurtured and fostered, because I wasn't living somewhere like Los Angeles where everything's already imagined for you, where you're always with people of different cultures, different backgrounds, living at urban place. When you're in a rural community, you have to imagine a lot of things for yourself. And so for me, going through that experience, it really has left an impact on my life, and also on what I want to do with my career, because that was unexpected. That was something that was not planned, and it made me realize at a very early age the value of time and what we do with it.
So because you are a young director and you've traveled around the world, you've been involved with so many projects, do you think seeing how things can be taken away so quickly, so unexpectedly, lit a fire under you to do so many things that maybe some would have planned around and waited for the perfect time when there really isn't a perfect time?
Well, you're right. There isn't a perfect time for anything. I think that at the end of the day, as a filmmaker, you can make excuses for what you choose to do and choose not to do, but you've got to always have projects ready at whatever stage in your career you might be at. Say you're waiting on a big project. So over the past year, I've been waiting on a film that I've been developing for a while that looks like it's going to move forward this year. I ran off to make this documentary, A Few Things About Cancer, a small film that didn't need much of a budget, because I believe you always have to be making and creating. Don't throw up barriers as to what you can and can't do. So certainly for me, in my own career, that experience with my father's death has really motivated me to constantly be creating and working all the time.
So it sounds like there was James' life up until 13, and then a new chapter once 13 hit. And so that time, as dark as it was, how did it kind of maybe, did you turn inward? Did you really start like going inward and forming this imagination because of that? You know, and I'm sure that it's a small town and maybe people are in your business, maybe that's good, maybe that's bad, maybe they're helpful, maybe not. But how did that shape your sort of creativity in that time? Because I'm sure you could go many ways with it.
Well, when I was a kid, I always was a pretty creative individual. I had spent most of my childhood writing and creating things. There's this wonderful game that came out when Windows 95 was released on our Packard Bell computer tower that was called Spider-Man Cartoon Maker. I don't know if anyone else played Spider-Man Cartoon Maker, but it was a wonderful game. All you did was you would take all of these stock scenes, these stock locations, characters, visual effects, and you would create movies out of them. Little animated, 2D, very simple animation films. And so my sister and I would go on Spider-Man Cartoon Maker and make sequels upon sequels upon sequels to these chronologue stories using all these Spider-Man characters. And that's how I would tell stories. I really wish I could have figured out a way to capture all of those, because some of them are pretty hilarious in hindsight. But unfortunately, you have to be able to run the program to open up all the files. You can't export them like you can now. So that was, a big part of my childhood growing up. And then, of course, using my imagination in a small town, I would do things like tell stories. When I was growing up, my parents bought me a tape recorder, and when we went driving on long trips, I would talk about all these characters I had invented in my head and play like a radio play, and they would record these on cassette tapes. So I had this little thing that I'd keep in the back seat, and I would talk about these characters and do these things. One time we were coming back from my grandmother's house in Florida, and I did a 10-hour funeral for one of the characters who was resurrected the next day. And somewhere that tape exists. I have no idea where it is, but I'm sure it's hilarious as well. But those things were formative in my childhood. And so stories and doing things that had to do with storytelling was something that I was already doing. Once I became a teenager and once my father passed, I did turn inward for a time and then started turning outward to kind of figure out ways to express myself. And I think that has really formulated the person I am today.